Episode 3 Traditional versus Benevolent Dictators. Essentially, why dictators help make America great. This episode is dedicated to Eyüp Çelik, Zoran Bayraktarovich, Manuel Pueyo Torres, and Howard Tang. My wife recently suggested I do an episode about dictatorships and immigrants. This is a broad topic because dictatorships go as far back as documented history shows, and people become immigrants for a variety of reasons. However, living in the United States, it's quite easy to meet immigrants who come from countries ruled by dictatorships. In fact, it's quite easy to meet immigrants in other countries with equal or more immigration-friendly policies, whether it is taxi driver or a doctor. So, in this episode, I examine examples of dictatorships, immigrants, and how immigration-friendly nations ultimately benefit at the loss of dictatorships. There are many types of dictatorships, ranging from despotism to fascism flavor types. For sake of keeping this episode within the standard 30-minute TV show broadcast, I hope, I compare traditional and benevolent dictators, how their people greatly benefited the United States, and attempt to draw some correlations between dictators and the talent that they have driven out, therefore making the United States better in the long run. I also focus on 20th century dictators who were in power for more than 20 years, without any claims to royalty nor religious supremacy, since many monarchs, depending on if they have to obey the Magna Carta or not, may fit the definition of dictators too. The United States, besides Native Americans, is a nation made up of immigrants, well prior to 1776, the year where it was about the shot heard around the world. The Dutch made New Amsterdam famous in 17th century AD. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. It's from a 1953 song recorded by the Four Lads. Pennsylvania Dutch are actually originally Germans. Deutsch, or German in German language, sounds similar to Dutch for the English speaker. Fredericksburg, Texas, originally Friedrichsburg, was founded in 1846 by Ottfried Hans Freiherr von Moisebach. In Manhattan, one can walk from having good Chinese dim sum to good cannolis by walking across Canal Street. So, in the United States, as long as the population density, as supported by immigration, is above a certain threshold, an interesting topic for applied mathematicians to write a thesis on, one can find the best, sometimes worst, depending on your point of view, of what immigrants bring to the table. So why did immigrants leave their countries? Think about this from an outsider's point of view. There are several obstacles to overcome. One is learning a new language, or a new vernacular, since the British and the Americans are divided by a common language. Another is making a decision regarding social fabric, community, religion, and so forth, whether to join a familiar one or to strike out on their own elsewhere in a new country. Finally, whether to integrate into new society or not. However, immigrants leave their countries for a variety of reasons too, such as economic, survival, and or religious/philosophical reasons. In the end, it becomes a cost-benefit analysis exercise regarding whether overcoming the obstacles is worth the immigration. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a dictator as one who holds unlimited power in government. Traditional dictators are famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, for using whatever means available to carry out their vision, often at the expense of some part of respective populations. Nicolae Ceausescu was a communist dictator of Romania from 1965 until 1989. Among a variety of policies and actions, he's famous for building the Palace of Parliament. Wow, a 365,000 square meter building. Meter, not feet. Third largest administrative building in the world after the Pentagon and Long Isle building, in which BBC's Top Gear drivers had fun driving through the tunnels under it. Ceausescu did this at great expense to the economy and the people. His government also actively discriminated against citizens who did not follow the dictator's line, which included how little rations of food they were given compared to others. So he clearly had biases against religious symbols, as he ordered many religious buildings and monuments to be moved or destroyed. Luckily for some, a good number of them were able to be relocated elsewhere. Think about immigrants. Notable Romanian immigrants include Nadia Comaneci, I hope I pronounced that properly, a gymnast who achieved a 10.0 at age 14 during the 1976 Montreal Olympic Games, who, by the way, then defected to the United States during the Romanian Revolution of 1989. Another fascinating immigrant includes Anastasia Sore, the eyebrow queen, famous for Anastasia Beverly Hills. She also left Romania during the Romanian Revolution that same year. Ceausescu clearly gave negative motivations to many others to escape Romania during his rule, which is another topic for a historian to explore at another time. Have fun, my dear friend Brian. On a personal note, one of the best pediatricians for my children was Romanian, who was fluent also in English and French. Having this pediatrician in our lives helped tremendously with respect to our years spent in Western Europe. No dictatorship analysis should leave the Soviet Union alone. Joseph Stalin was effectively a dictator of the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1952, although he remains popular among a significant number of Russians and Georgians, because technically Stalin was Georgian, at least by birth. Since 1991, he was also responsible for many persecutions, hard labor, think Gulag, and deaths. And after Russia was no longer distracted by Germany during World War II, the declaration of war on Japan helped make 1945 a remarkable year for the Axis powers. Some notable immigrants, whether by choice or force is also for another debate, includes Yul Brynner and Mark Chagall. Yul Brynner, originally Yuli Borisovich Brynner from Vladivostok, from the eastern part of the Soviet Union, was famous for The King and I, The Ten Commandments, Think Pharaoh, The Magnificent Seven. The movie sold about 67 million tickets in the Soviet Union, and, you guessed it, the original Westworld, the movie. Mark Chagall, born Moisha Zaharovich Shagalov in Lyozna, which is actually in modern-day Belarus, produced significant artworks for both New York, Chicago, and yes, the ceiling of the Paris Opera House. Stalin sure did chase away some good talent, that's for certain. Italy also had Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator from 1922 to 1945, who modernized, at least in his mind, Italy for his time frame, at the expense of burying many historical Roman ruins. Go check out Rome, it's worth it. If you think I'm joking, go take a train from Roma Termini to Latina on the way to Napoli or Naples, and look for the pine trees on the main road. Their young age shows that Latina was a new town created during Mussolini's rule, aka Mussolini Town. Because his government had anti-Semitic policies, this encouraged many people who were either Jewish or had Jewish family to escape or leave. So obviously many people left Italy under these circumstances. In particular, Enrico Fermi, famous for the Manhattan Project, Roberto and Ugo Fano left due to anti-Semitism in Italy. These people ended up being able to freely contribute to American scientific and technology advancements, feats that would have been denied them in fascist Italy. Also, Giuliana Tesoro left Italy after being denied academic opportunities due to fascist racial laws, and ended up inventing flame retardant fiber in the United States too. So, fighter pilots, you have Dr. Tesoro to thank for your flight suits. Regarding 20th century China, Mao Zedong, or in Korean in pronunciation, Mo Zedong, effectively ruled the People's Republic of China from 1943 to 1976. His rule was marked by a variety of 5-year plans, as well as reforming Puyi, the last emperor of China, into an ordinary Chinese communist, which is quite remarkable because, according to Mao, Lenin executed Nicholas II since Lenin could not reform the Tsar into a Soviet communist. Oh, by the way, his government also took over Tibet. Based on immigration population numbers, there are a lot of notable immigrants to take note of here. One interesting one is Ping Fu, by her account, who after the Cultural Revolution was imprisoned for results associated with investigating the one-child policy and its undesired effects. How she left for the United States and ended up co-founding Geomagic, which became part of 3D Systems Incorporated. Ming Xie, whose family was also persecuted during the Cultural Revolution, was a founder of Cogent Systems, which is famous for its biometric fingerprint system. By the way, he's worth about $1.6 billion US today. A good friend of mine and his family immigrated from China when he was in his late teens. He joined the US Army Reserves and worked towards an undergraduate degree in history. Today, he's a major in the US Air Force. This is a guy who not only learned English, but made a conscious decision to integrate himself into society by adapting his habits because he knew that he didn't have the same opportunities for advancement back in China. Moving on to Western Europe, Francisco Franco, a Spanish dictator from 1936 to 1975, kept Spain out of World War II, although he tended to reply to Axis demands based on proximity. But its Spanish Civil War led to many changes, including fairness to women, economic developments, but also at the expense of various oppressions and other habits dictators seem to have. What's unique about Franco is that he changed with the times because the nature of his dictatorship evolved. Oh, let's be fair, 39 years, it's a long time. His decisions cost Spain the opportunity to join NATO the first time around because of his quasi-pro-Axis leanings. Franco's rule did encourage famous immigrants to make other countries prosperous. Arturo Barea, after fleeing the Spanish Civil War, made his mark at BBC's World Service Spanish section, as well as publishing a bunch of books. Pablo Picasso stayed in Paris and ended up donating the Chicago Picasso to Chicago, even refusing the $100,000 payment for the sculpture. These people helped museums and other businesses in France, Britain, and the US become more prosperous than in Spain. One honorable mention here is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, since he is only 2 years away from achieving the 20-year status. His government is recently famous for changing Hagia Sophia back to being a mosque. That's nobody's business but the Turks. This former footballer, soccer player, for Kasim Pasa, was elected to be Prime Minister and eventually President of Turkey since 2003. His government at the beginning tackled the challenges of modernizing Turkish infrastructure, as well as paying back all IMF, International Monetary Fund, loans, because he inherited $23.5 billion worth of payoff too. However, as of the mid-2010s, his government started exhibiting power consolidation and associated purges, such as the 2016 government purges as a result of the failed coup that year. This included purging many from government positions, including putting people into prison for lengthy prison time for anyone thought to have too much Western influence, to include Western education. Let's think about this for a little bit. What if one purged person was a fighter pilot of a Turkish F-16? Assuming it costs $1 million to train an adult to be a fighter pilot, if Turkey purged 100 fighter pilots, that's $100 million unavailable for reinvestment elsewhere. By the way, for current metrics, go check out a WordPress site by looking up the term purgenato.wordpress.com and the article called Broken Wings. I have another friend who was a Turk, was sent by Turkey to attend the US Air Force Academy, which is a $300,000 affair. And after graduating with an engineering degree, he became a Turkish Air Force officer. Turkey then sent him to University of Houston, which is probably another $150,000, for him to get a graduate degree in engineering. He then became a Turkish F-16 pilot, then an instructor pilot, and eventually a Turkish General Staff Officer. He was also targeted for purging too, so he elected to start a new life, which meant Turkey lost more than $1.5 million in their decision to purge anyone with Western influence, at least as far as this colleague is concerned, and more than 10 years worth of experience, which cannot be replaced overnight. Americans too have Turkey to thank for some unexpected reasons. Hamdi Ulukaya, a Kurd from Erzincan, Turkey, is the CEO of Chobani. Ercan Ilyasova is currently a player for Milwaukee Bucks, although I'm not sure if he's featured in NBA Jam series, since the game stopped being produced as of the mid-2010s. Mehmet Murat Okur has the honor of being the first Turk to be an NBA coach, thanks to the Phoenix Suns. One thing is sure about these dictators. Their policies end up chasing out some good talent. But what about benevolent dictators? Yes, some historians do classify some as being benevolent. For sake of this episode, let's define one as a dictator who rules for the benefit of the country and the people. An altruist, at least in the dictator's mind, if you will. Josip Broz, also known as Josip Broz Tito, the dictator of Yugoslavia from 1943 to 1980, managed to keep a state/federation made up of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, actually Hrvatska, which is why the ATA code for Croatia is HRV, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia together. Although he heavily discriminated against ethnic Albanians, he did encourage use of native national languages. He also helped Yugoslavia maintain its independence from the Soviet Union. He also became the first communist country to open its borders to foreigners. and he became a founding member of the non-aligned movement. He also encouraged the people to work in Germany and Ethiopia and helped Mexican culture be very popular in his federation. One thing he did differently than Stalin was to have workers own the companies they work for, which is consistent with Frank Zappa's quote about communism. Communism doesn't work because people want to own stuff. Yes, Tito's government did dissatisfy a few. Mike Grgic, a Croatian winemaker, ended up creating a Chardonnay in California that yielded the 1973 Judgment of Paris. For further fictional accounts, look up the movie called Bottle Shock, which stars Bill Pullman. Branko Lustig was the main driver for cinematic classics such as Herman Wouk's Windows of War, Schindler's List, and Black Hawk Down. Toni Kukoc, another Croat, is famous not just for playing basketball for the Chicago Bulls, but also being featured as a selectable player in NBA Jam game, since Michael Jordan, due to intellectual property issues, could not be featured in the game series. Although this example is not about an immigrant, it is still noteworthy. Tito should be given some credit regarding the Yugo, since he was not responsible for inflicting that car upon the United States. That vehicle, it's actually a Zastava Coral, rebadged for the US market as the Yugo, was imported into the US by Malcolm Bricklin, an American with bright ideas not necessarily backed up with effective planning. The Yugo during the late 1980s had so many reliability issues, the "you go nowhere" phrase became commonplace. But let's be fair about this. Malcolm Bricklin imported the vehicles without making sure parts and service support were adequate. After all, what if we imported a Chrysler hatchback to Yugoslavia without establishing Mopar anything over there? In the end, Malcolm Bricklin, not Tito, was responsible for inflicting a logistician's nightmare upon the American populace. Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, the country famous for the Singapore sling, yes, it's good, from 1959 to 1990, led his country to not be considered the third Chinese country, bring in democracy, and modernize its economy. Although, by the way, the English is a working language for the sake of encouraging many to integrate into society. For the city-state, it's a very small place, by the way, to maintain its independence even after being freed from the British Empire and resisting China, that's a lot to be said. However, he also harassed many opponents, suppressed media, and made corporal punishment a thing there. If you don't believe me, just ask Michael Peter Fay and Oliver Fricker. At least these two, for breaking Singapore's laws, would disagree with the idea of Lee Kuan Yew as being a benevolent dictator. Singapore has an unusual case of someone famous moving in as an immigrant. Jet Li, originally Chinese, then after living in the US, became a Singaporean citizen. So why would somebody who's already successful elsewhere become a Singaporean citizen? Singapore must have something that was a higher priority for Jet Li that he could not readily find elsewhere. Most likely, better education setup for his kids. Going around the world, looking at Hispaniola, Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of Dominican Republic from 1930 to 1961, was notable for a variety of achievements, some by intention and some by accident. As Jared Diamond in his Collapse book notes, Trujillo imported resources, i.e. natural gas, so his population didn't have to cut down trees for cooking fuel. He had to because he nationalized the forest, not necessarily for altruistic reasons, but so when he could resume his logging business after his dictatorship, all the forests could be his. But this actually had a good effect, since his side of Hispaniola didn't have the landslides and earthquakes that Haiti had due to resource mismanagement. So his greed accidentally did good things for his people as far as resource management is concerned. Yes, he did discriminate against ethnic Haitians, but he was the only leader to accept European Jews fleeing Nazi Germany during the Avian Conference of 1938 out of 32 nations. Ever hear of Oscar de la Renta? Originally Oscar Aristides Renta Fiallo, that's it. He was one of the couturiers of Jacqueline Kennedy, and his works have become famous in London as well as in New York. Victor A. Carreño holds a patent for the single-frequency multi-transmitter telemetry system. And Jose Blanco, the cigar industrialist, leads many cigar tasting seminars to this day. And finally, one honorable mention here is Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, who was the Portuguese Prime Minister from 1932 to 1968. What is remarkable about his situation is that in addition to separating state from religion, although he had qualifications, believe it or not, to be a Catholic priest. He paid attention to Portuguese history by keeping Portugal neutral during World War II, up to a certain point, and helping Jews who fled Axis powers. However, Portugal, unlike other major colonial powers, tried to hold on to their colonies, which turned out to be a waste of many resources. Speaking of notable immigrants coming from Portugal and its territories, did you know that Maria Teresa Tirstein Simoes Ferreira, also known as Teresa Heinz, the heiress to the Heinz ketchup enterprise, as well as the wife of John Kerry, is originally from the Portuguese Mozambique? And also, Nuno Duarte Gil Mendes Betancourt, professionally known as Nuno Betancourt, is originally from the Portuguese Azores. He's famous not just for the Extreme, the rock band, famous for the song Get the Funk Out, but also his time as the guitar star for Rihanna, and for the Washburn N4 electric guitar, which is notable for using Stephen Davies' extended cutaway neck joining system. For an audio sample, check out the song Get the Funk Out, the one that has Brian May's commentary, Brian May of Queen. I have to give credit to a distinguished Portuguese here. Manuel Poejo Torres heavily encouraged me to systemically analyze complex topics by looking for unrelated themes that do connect to central themes. I could not have gathered my observations into these episodes in a disciplined manner without his mentorship. Also, for a great rendition of Istanbul, Not Constantinople, the song, check out the Tiny Toons episode featuring Plucky Duck, titled after the song name. The up-tempo version is courtesy of They Might Be Giants. Some concluding thoughts. Dictators, whom some consider to be benevolent, don't seem to be benevolent to everyone all the time. Dictators who don't give their people good reasons to stay in country end up chasing away people who end up making other countries, i.e. the United States, much more prosperous. Also, dictators who heeded Niccolo Machiavelli's advice from The Prince Treatise, mainly, don't make your competitors better off, and don't get yourselves involved in foreign occupation unless you can be there, had better odds of being considered benevolent. So, Benito Mussolini is guilty of ignoring his fellow Italians' wisdom by chasing away Enrico Fermi, who ended up being integral to the success of the Manhattan Project, leading to the end of World War II in 1945. And now for the Kevin Bacon game. The US Navy owes a debt of gratitude to Mussolini. Reason? He chased out Enrico Fermi, the architect of the nuclear thing, which was Chaim Godalia Rickover's, later known as Admiral, that's right, 4-star Admiral, Hyman Rickover of the United States Navy, who's originally from Poland. Also the longest serving Navy officer, much longer than Archibald Henderson, the grand old man of the US Marine Corps, claimed to fame in the US Navy as the father of the nuclear navy. Therefore, by 5 degrees of separation, the US Navy nuclear propulsion sailors should say grazie mille to their Italian counterparts. Thank you for listening. If you have any other subjects I should explore, please feel free to add them in the comments section of this episode. And honestly, even if it's only one of you out there who's listening, it's worth it. So any suggestions you got, please keep them coming. And yes, please feel free to subscribe, but don't feel pressured to do so. Thank you. See you next time.